9 World War II soldier sleeping hacks for surviving frozen ground. Subscribe to After the Sirens, leave a comment with your thoughts and, well, share this with anyone who takes military history and survival seriously. If you care about how real people endured real conditions, this channel is built for you. Cold killed more soldiers in World War II than enemy fire in many campaigns. Trench foot, hypothermia, frostbite, exhaustion and sleep deprivation quietly destroyed combat effectiveness long before bullets did. From the Eastern Front to the Ardennes, soldiers had to master the brutal science of sleeping on frozen ground with almost nothing. What follows is not romanticized hardship. These are proven, documented methods soldiers relied on to survive winter nights when tents, stoves, and proper bedding were often unavailable. This matters because sleep is not comfort. It is survival. And honestly, the men who figured this out lived longer. How soldiers learned that insulation from the ground mattered more than insulation from the air. World War II soldiers quickly discovered that the frozen ground was their deadliest enemy at night. Snow might look soft, but frozen earth pulls body heat relentlessly. German, Soviet, Finnish and Allied troops learned to prioritize ground insulation above all else. Even a thin barrier mattered. Pine branches, straw from barns, dry grass, newspaper, rope coils, spare clothing, cardboard from ration crates or disassembled pack frames were placed underneath the body. The key was air pockets. Anything that lifted the body even a few centimeters off the ground slowed heat loss dramatically. Modern application is straightforward. If you are winter camping or in a cold emergency, your first task is not covering your body, but insulating beneath it. A folded jacket under your torso can outperform an extra blanket thrown on top. Why soldiers slept on backpacks and rifles instead of the ground? Infantrymen often slept on their packs, ammunition pouches, gas mask canisters, and sometimes even rifles wrapped in cloth. This was not comfort, it was physics. Dense objects trapped air and prevented direct contact with frozen soil. German manuals explicitly advised using equipment as bedding when shelter was unavailable. In practice, soldiers arranged their packs under shoulders and hips, the highest pressure points where heat loss is fastest. Today, this translates to using anything rigid as a thermal break. In an emergency, even stacked water bottles or boots under your core can preserve warmth through the night. Sleeping diagonally was, well, a clever way to reduce cold exposure in those narrow shelters. In foxholes, trenches and dugouts, soldiers quickly learned that lying straight just didn't cut it. By sleeping at an angle, they could rest more of their body against the insulated walls instead of the frozen floor. In snow trenches, the Finns would pack the sides with snow and branches, then lean just a bit into the wall while sleeping. The wall, once it was insulated, was definitely warmer than the ground. You know, this technique is still used in modern winter bivouacs. So, if you ever have to sleep in a cramped space, try to orient yourself in a way that minimizes contact with the coldest surface and maximizes contact with whatever insulation you have. Now, let's talk about why soldiers changed into dry clothing, even when it meant braving a few moments of intense cold. One of the toughest lessons of winter warfare was that damp clothing could be deadly. Sweat would freeze, snow would melt and then refreeze. Both Soviet and German troops were drilled to change their socks and inner layers before sleeping. even if it meant a short, miserable exposure to freezing air. Dry fabric traps heat, while wet fabric just saps it away. Soldiers often slept in their driest layer, putting damp clothing under their bodies or near their torso to dry it out with body heat, but not actually wearing it. Modern survivalists can really take this to heart. Never sleep in wet clothes if you have any other option, even if the change feels absolutely brutal in the moment. And then there's the matter of shared body heat, how soldiers manage to use it without losing their combat readiness. Buddy sleeping was actually quite common and, frankly, very practical. 2 or 3 soldiers would sleep pressed together, either back-to-back or side-by-side, especially when holding a defensive position. This was often regulated in units, just to make sure no one fell into too deep a sleep and everyone stayed ready. The accumulation of body heat was significant, really reducing the risk of hypothermia. Even today, sharing heat is still one of the most effective cold survival strategies. In a non-combat situation, controlled shared sleeping under a common cover can dramatically increase your survival odds when insulation is limited. Why eating fat and carbohydrates before sleep mattered. During the Second World War, rations were often unbalanced, but, experienced soldiers learned to eat specific foods before sleeping in cold conditions. Fatty meat, bread and sugar increased metabolic heat production during rest. Both German and American soldiers reported sleeping warmer after consuming bacon grease, chocolate or hard bread before bedding down. The lesson here is biological. Calories equal heat. In cold conditions, eating before sleep is not optional. It is fuel for thermoregulation. Soldiers found that blocking the wind was often more effective than piling on extra layers of clothing. Wind, after all, stripped away warmth much faster than low temperatures alone. So they built low windbreaks out of snow blocks, sandbags, ponchos, shelter halves, or even just earth. And believe it or not, even a knee-high barrier could dramatically reduce heat loss. In the Ardennes, American troops dug shallow scrapes just to get below the wind level. The modern takeaway is honestly quite simple. Blocking wind is often more effective than simply adding insulation. Sometimes a tarp, a backpack wall, or a natural terrain feature can outperform extra clothing. Why did head and neck insulation decide who woke up alive? Well, helmets were removed during sleep and replaced with caps, scarves, or even improvised balaclavas made from shirts. Soldiers quickly learned that heat loss through the head was severe, especially when lying still. Wrapping the neck and covering the ears reduced frostbite and preserved core temperature. And to this day, a hat and neck covering remain absolutely critical. In cold survival scenarios, protecting the head can truly be the difference between restful sleep and hypothermia. Let's talk about how disciplined sleep positioning actually prevented frostbite. Soldiers were trained to avoid sleeping curled up too tightly or with their extremities pressed against frozen surfaces. Hands were tucked near the torso, feet were elevated or insulated, and boots were loosened to maintain circulation. Tight boots, as it turns out, caused frostbite, but loose lacing saved toes. These details really mattered. Modern winter survival, honestly, still follows the same rules. Maintain circulation, avoid compression, and always position your limbs to stay warm. If this kind of deep, practical military history matters to you, do subscribe to After the Sirens. Share this with fellow historians and survivalists, and leave a comment letting us know which technique surprised you the most. This knowledge kept men alive through the worst winters of the 20th century, and honestly, it remains just as relevant today.